downstairs.
There we go.
He's down there.
Good evening. On behalf of Novi Community School District, I would like to welcome Jim Craycraft to this interview for the position of superintendent. Mr. Craycraft is currently superintendent of Clinton Community Schools in Clinton, Michigan. I'll take a few minutes to briefly describe our format. The interview may take up to 90 minutes. There will be 23 questions from the board. Toward the end of the interview, time permitting, we will give you the opportunity to ask the board questions and make a closing statement. We will let you know if time is becoming an issue and there is a need to pick up the pace of the responses. We have a big clock to my left to help you
Appreciate
keep
that.
track of that and all of us.
Thank you.
For those watching this interview, we welcome your feedback. Those watching virtually may use the link provided for this purpose. Those present may use either the QR code or paper form provided. Although the task of choosing our next superintendent is the responsibility of the Board of Education as the elected representatives of our community, we value and seriously consider the input of our stakeholders in this process. So I will begin with our first opening question. Mr. Craycraft, while we have had the opportunity to review your application materials, audience members have not.
Okay.
Please briefly review your background and share what causes you to be interested in this position at this point in your career.
Thank you very much. I want to begin this evening by thanking the Board of Education for the invitation to be here. I'm grateful for the opportunity to interview with Novi Community Schools. Please know that this is not an occasion that I take lightly, and I want to be clear that I'm looking for a long-term professional relationship with your district. Long-term relationships are a big part of my life and who I am as an educator, a husband, and a father. For the past 6 years, I've had the privilege of leading and learning in Clinton Community Schools. I currently serve as a superintendent, and I strive to be the lead learner. I have 6 years of district leadership, along with many years of building level leadership. And with those experiences, I have many experiences that are rooted in the classroom and at the secondary level. As superintendent of schools, I am working collaboratively with the Clinton Board of Education to develop an increased awareness and competencies connected to a wide range of issues and challenges in our learning community and in public education in general. Our singular goal is to maintain a common vision and work together strategically on behalf of all stakeholders. Our vision in Clinton is to inspire and empower endless possibilities for every person. I have numerous examples I would like to share with you this evening, but in the interest of time, I will talk about the most meaningful that I've been a part of. Beginning in 2017, we increased our student enrollment by 18% after several years of declining enrollment. We did this by actively marketing our district and continuously improving our programming. We increased our fund balance from 18% to 32% during my first 4 years, and this has helped us to invest in our people and our programs. We passed a $35 million bond last year to improve our facilities, and we passed a sinking fund to continue our one-to-one technology. This is really critical for us, especially during the pandemic. We have been recognized by the state of Michigan for being a pilot school for the Michigan Department of Education Transformation Zone. Transformation Zone schools focus on district-wide and systemic implementation and sustaining research-based best practices in education. This work has been supported by the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, MDE, and our focus has been on multiple tiered systems of support and positive behavior supports. We're in the process of creating and evaluating our articulated curriculum and improving services for all students, including special education services and opportunities for students with autism. We changed our educational practices to adapt to the challenges of the pandemic, and we created procedures and protocols of how we would operate during the pandemic, and we continue to evolve our practices as the pandemic subsides. Finally, and most importantly, I guided our Board of Education and the community through a mascot rebranding process to become more culturally aware and competent. The board and community supported the mascot change from the Redskins to the Red Wolves, which we implemented this past year. Although the journey moving from having a culturally insensitive mascot to our more inclusive brand took us a number of years and was extremely challenging, I was prepared to lead this important work. Now that I've shared a little bit about my professional experiences and what's been keeping me busy these last few years, I'd like to take an opportunity to talk to you about my formal education. I'm a Michigan native. I grew up in small towns, including Walled Lake, when it was a small town, Adrian, and Albion. I lived in diverse communities, but they were rarely equitable and rarely inclusive. As a young man, that bothered me. After graduating from Albion High School, I was very fortunate to attend Albion College. There, I double majored in economics and management and secondary education. Next, I attended graduate school in Ypsilanti and earned my master's degree in counseling from Eastern Michigan University. Ypsilanti was more diverse than the smaller communities that I had been raised in, but I witnessed problems with equity and inclusion there as well. I conducted postgraduate work in educational policy studies and urban studies as part of the Galileo Teacher Leadership doctoral cohort at Wayne State University in Detroit. I also, along the way, earned continued education credits from the State University of New York, Rockport, in secondary science education. Those who know me know that I am passionate about science education and have been for a very long time. Another important thing to highlight is I completed my International Baccalaureate certificate in administration from Oakland University. I did that as we were implementing the International Baccalaureate middle years program in my previous school system. For district level leadership training, I completed the Michigan Leadership Institute Superintendent's Academy and the Michigan Association of School Administrators Horizons programs for superintendents. During my educational journey, I gained many years of public school experience. After earning my bachelor's, I started work at a year-round institution, residential program for court-involved youth who had experienced trauma, loss, and violence. At Stark Commonwealth Schools in Albion, Michigan, I served as a counselor and a group leader and a special education teacher for nearly 8 years. Next, I worked in the Northville Public Schools, just down the road, and I served there for 21 years. In Northville, I served as a teacher, a coach, and a summer school director and assistant principal for the first 6 years. I then served as a building principal at Hillside Middle School for the next 15 years before becoming superintendent in Clinton Community Schools. During that time, I led a team of teachers who received more than 50 awards of excellence at the local, state, and national levels. While I am extremely proud of the award-winning staff at Hillside and the much-deserved recognition, I am most proud of their efforts to create a caring environment where caring was fashionable and kids could be comfortable and feel included. It's so important at the middle school level. We also did some pretty amazing and innovative things while at Hillside. Some of those included we piloted the Fulbright Japan Collaborative School Science Network and partnered with a school in Japan and did an exchange, the first Fulbright-funded exchange with middle school students. I served as the administrative liaison to the Fulbright Japan Master Teacher Program for over 25 district teachers who participated in the Fulbright Master Teacher Program. And I participated as an administrator in the International Educators to Japan program sponsored by the Japanese Business Society of Detroit. I was involved in that program with superintendents from Farmington, from Novi, and also educators from metropolitan Detroit and Canada. We implemented the IB Middle Years program at Hillside, and we established a long-standing partnership with the Detroit Zoo and the Hillside Animal Room. The Hillside Animal Room was a hands-on, minds-on opportunity for students to experience life science. But what I'm most proud of is that I led collaboratively with an innovative team of teachers and support staff with tremendous support from the community, the Board of Education, and central office. None of these professional achievements would be possible without the most important thing in my life, and that is my family. I've been married to my wife, Holly, for 32 years. We've raised 3 amazing children. We've lived in the Norfolk community for 27 of those years. Our children are now adults, all graduates from public schools. One of my sons, Nick, is here tonight with Holly, my wife. Nick graduated from Central Michigan University with a double major in marketing and logistics and works for a Michigan-based company as a marketing director. My daughter, Grace, is currently in Minnesota, where she works as a camp counselor for Campfire America. She is pursuing a degree in early childhood. My youngest son, Benjamin, he's stationed in Corpus Christi, Texas, where he's undergoing training to become a naval aviator. He graduated in 2021 from the United States Naval Academy at Annapolis. In closing, I hope you can see how inspired and proud of my family I am and how I benefit from their support. Holly and I have raised our children to be outstanding, hardworking citizens, committed to service. All 3 benefited greatly from an outstanding public education. I believe in public education. As you can see from my personal and professional history, I value long-term commitments. I want to acknowledge that I'm here to interview tonight because of my family, support throughout my life, and the collective result of working with some amazing and talented educators and mentors throughout my entire career. As we learn more about each other tonight, because I'm interviewing you just like you're interviewing me, I want you to know that I embrace the role of lead learner for the Novi Community Schools. Throughout my life, I've lived in and worked in very diverse environments, where I also witnessed us fall short of equity and inclusion. Please know, as superintendent, I will continue to lead the efforts to be more equitable and inclusive of all people, and encourage family and community involvement and the involvement of all stakeholders in the Novi Community Schools.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to our next question,
Okay.
which is, what are the immediate challenges you would expect to face as our superintendent? Given these, tell us how you would hit the ground running on your first day and be ready to address these challenges.
Okay. Well, we're starting, we have to plan for a school year, not knowing what's happening with the pandemic. So making sure that our pandemic protocols and safety protocols are in place. We've all had to adjust on the fly for the last 2 years. I feel confident that I would be able to do that with the team, which leads me to the next concern, is that I would be hitting the ground running with a brand-new central office team. So building a solid team immediately, quickly, and that does take time, but that would be a priority and is part of my 90-day plan that I will be sharing with you at the end tonight. Also, and I think most importantly, is planning a retreat and an opportunity to build a team of 8 with the Board of Education. I think that is an imperative for a new superintendent. I think there's three examples.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Given your research on our district, what do you believe are the 2 or 3 most critical long-term priorities we will need to address? How would your background and skills help us address these priorities?
Okay. Well, getting back to student safety, again, safety and security of students in the district is a major priority for all districts, including Novi. During my research, I know that you, during the 2019 bond, you have funds that you are securing your entrances, and you've been doing that for a long time. But I think to continue to evaluate and provide for the security of students and teachers within the system, that would be a number 1. Number 2, and one of the things that draws me to your district is your continued work on diversity, equity, and inclusion. I've been very impressed with the efforts that Novi Community Schools has taken in that direction, and that is work that I am passionate about, as you can tell perhaps from my introduction. So I know that that's a priority for the community, and for the district. Additionally, maintaining, hiring, and attracting talented teachers. That's hitting us all across the state, and being able to put quality educators in our classrooms and our buildings, leading them. Those would be three of the priorities that I think are important and near and dear to the Novi Community Schools.
Thank you.
Sure.
What specific qualities and capabilities do you bring to this position that may set you apart from others?
Okay, it's a great question. I've lived in the greater community for 27 years. I served for 21 years in a like district to Novi. I have those experiences and successes in doing that. I also have 6 years as a sitting superintendent through the pandemic, and experiences with second-order change initiatives that have really helped move our district forward. So I think I bring that experience to the table, as well as my knowledge of the community, and over the years, many interactions with the Novi Community Schools, just from the logistics of my students. I don't think there's a building in your district I haven't been in for either a meeting or a sporting activity. I'm very familiar with Novi. I also believe that I could hit the ground running very quickly.
Thank you. We are going to move on to Trustee Cook to ask the next questions.
Hey, thank you.
Okay. Okay, maintaining healthy relationships with school and community stakeholders is important to the Board of Education. Please share with us how you have gone about building and maintaining successful relationships with all members of the school community.
It's a great question. I think high visibility and interaction, making sure that you are not only in front of the students, but also the parents, attending school events, community events, volunteering your time. Those are all ways that I've been involved in Clinton, and also when I was with the Norfolk Public Schools. But the high visibility, and then really maintaining relationships with important stakeholders. During my first year in Clinton, I met with police, fire, village council, joined Rotary, also attended multiple varsity sporting events, fine arts events. Parents, but more importantly, children want to see you at their events. And I see the role of the superintendent as you're the face of the district. And being out and being visible, asking good questions, also meeting with folks informally, as well as inviting them to formal events is important. So those are some of the things I've done and I would continue to do.
Thank you. How do you think various stakeholders, such as parents, staff members, and community members, should be involved in our planning process and setting the direction of the district?
That's a good question. I've long believed that having parent involvement in schools is critical. When I was at Hillside, I would have as many as 15 parents in my building every day helping monitor lunch. It's called the PASS program, Parent and Student Support Systems. It worked beautifully for well over 17 years. I think in terms of involvement in the governance, that's the governance of the district is the board's responsibility, along with the superintendent, that shared governance. However, being very transparent and communicating board goals and explaining rationale. I think sometimes, especially coming out of the pandemic, adults are very suspect. They're asking questions, and we should never, ever be afraid of people asking questions. When I hear districts complaining about over-involved parents, I say, welcome them in. We don't have anything to hide. In fact, we want to partner with you. And I practiced that my entire career in Northville, and I practiced that the whole time I've been in Clinton. We want parent involvement. We want your input.
Okay, thank you. Effective and timely communication is vital to the success of a school district. Please describe the types of communication students, staff, parents, and the Board of Education should expect to receive from you.
Okay. All right, that's a lot. Okay. Students, staff, and parents, key stakeholders. We use a lot of social media, and we also have a very active website. Our building leads, and again, the district that I serve is about a sixth of the size of Novice. So economies of scale, if you will, as I described some of what we do. We're also able to move very quickly in terms of our communication protocols. So we utilize social media. Our website, as I mentioned, we do a weekly letter to all parents from each building lead. I also communicate with the community via newsletters and briefs and social media. And with the Board of Education, our communication via the superintendent is usually a brief. Also, we talk via phone very frequently. We're small enough. My communication with the board president is sometimes daily. A few times this past fall, it has been hourly. And then we have a mechanism for getting information out to the entire board. That can be through an email, and that's typically how that happens. That's a formal procedure. The other, I think I hit parents, newsletters, websites, social media. Students are adept at the social media. That's how they get most of the information. I had a parent one time tell me that, well, I didn't get the newsletter because I never read my email, but my student keeps me involved because everything's on Facebook. And so again, being able to operate like we are digital natives, knowing that, at least at my age, that I'm not. I'm a digital visitor. Some days it feels that way. And communicating in a way that really impacts everybody, because not all of our constituents in Novi get on Facebook. Some of them want the traditional newsletter or the media. Just an aside, one of the first allies and friends I made when I came to Clinton was the owner of the Clinton local newspaper. And it's always a good idea. And we have worked wonderfully together in terms of getting information out about the exciting things happening. So utilizing local media in the Novi area would be very important. And our papers have, and at least in my lifetime, have become more regional than local. So that's always a challenge.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Trustee Hood?
Yeah, thank you. As our superintendent, how would you advocate for political action that benefits our district and public education throughout our state?
Thank you, Trustee Hood. I know that Novi has a very active legislative action network. I would meet with LA, the LAN is my first week on the job. That's actually part of my 90-day plan as well. Additionally, I've been involved at the legislative level in a variety of ways throughout my career, whether that was the Network of Michigan Educators, as well as advocating for, in front of the Senate, State Senate, giving testimony for the expanded use of sinking funds, primarily so that we can use those funds for the purchase of buses. And so I'm very comfortable meeting in Lansing with legislators. Sorry, it's been a long day. I'm very active with the Rural School Equity Caucus in Lenawee County and Southern Michigan. It is a legislative action network similar to what you have here, but we really advocate for rural schools, increased funding, and for our legislators to be informed about what the needs are for all students. So I'm very comfortable doing that. I've been doing that as when I was a building administrator as well as a superintendent. As a building administrator, I was involved in the Michigan Association of Middle School Educators. I wrote a newsletter, teacher tips, that was published for a number of years. That was sponsored by me, and advocating for public education and advocating for middle school education.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Superintendents are often faced with the challenge of making decisions when there is no clear right answer, and members of the community are split on the right path forward. Talk about a time when you were faced with a difficult decision where you knew there would be a group of people unhappy with your decision, whichever way you decided. How did you go about making that decision and getting people on board with the direction you determined was best?
Thank you for that, Trustee Hood. I have a very timely and relevant example, would be through the pandemic. As our first go at the pandemic, and I'll say 2021, I look at the pandemic from the lens of the end of 20 school year when everyone was afraid and nobody really knew what was going on and how we behaved and how we developed plans. Then the 2021 school year, where we were mandated from our legislature and our state for some of our protocols. And then in 21-22, as we lessened some of the requirements. So to that end, we followed the mask mandates in Lenawee County. And we did so as a superintendent's group. All of us went lockstep. We were all together. When masking became recommended and not mandated, we all followed that protocol, which we made it really up to the individual and the student. And we did that based on the recommendation from community health. So our rationale, my rationale, was that, I like to think I'm an expert on a lot of things, especially education. But none of us were experts on a pandemic and public health. So following the guidelines implemented by public health allowed us to make some difficult decisions, even though we were at crosshairs with different interest groups. I can say that 2021, we were out of school some. That was before the vaccine. We closed schools a bit. We were able to offer asynchronous learning, face-to-face learning, as well as virtual learning. We had a potpourri of options for families because that's what families wanted. But we were out of school more during that time and that was with the mask mandates and with strong protocols. We still kept up our strong protocols, but with masking optional, last year, I think we had a half day that was pandemic related. We had more weather days. So we were very fortunate in that experience, but to your question, it did create a lot of, those were hard decisions to make, but I strongly feel that we made the right ones based on the recommendations from public health and what our community wanted.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Question number 10. Please share specific ways that our district should work with other districts to support learning for all students.
I like that question. I think Novi is a district with lots of resources. It's interesting. I was joking earlier about the mysterious baseline invisible fence there, and our rivalries between my hometown and Novi, and was chuckling. But I think there are plenty of opportunities, especially on major issues like the pandemic, where we should be collaborating. Lenawee County is a school of choice county. We compete with each other all the time, not only athletically and academically, but for students. But we were able to put that to the side and work together. I think in Novi, with so many strong districts that are next to you, and Novi being one of those strong districts, I honestly I was always a little perplexed why Novi and Northville didn't do more together with staff development. I know there was a time in my long career way back that Farmington, Northville, Novi worked very closely together, and the best example of that is the Galileo Teacher Leadership Academy, which is still in existence. I was in the first group, the first cohort, and I learned so much by interacting with Novi teachers, Farmington teachers, Northville teachers, and other folks in that cohort. So I think there are plenty of opportunities to do that, and I would encourage that because I think there's strength in that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to trustee Mena.
Hello, this is question 11. So
Okay,
that you know
thank
where
you.
we're at 23.
Yeah, I'm going to write it down. Thank you, Trustee Mena.
Okay. What is the most difficult decision that you've had to deal with in your educational career, and how was it resolved?
Wow. Difficult decision or difficult situation? I'm going to kind of go with both. September 17th, 2021, I received a phone call from my high school principal that 4 of our high school seniors had been in a horrific automobile accident on North Adrian Highway. 2 of them were killed on impact. 2 of them were seriously injured. The decision of how to move forward the next day with kids and families is probably the most difficult decision I've ever made in my life. Nothing prepares you for this. And as you can tell, I get a little bit emotional still talking about it. The students involved, I was close to, had strong relationship with. We're small. We graduated class. This class is our smallest. We graduated a class 2 weeks ago that was about 80. They were close-knit. They were all friends. And as I sat in bed talking to my high school principal and got up, and we began to plan. We spent the whole night planning how we were going to greet our students, greet our families, who was reaching out to the families involved, how we were getting our information from the police department. Again, probably the most difficult decisions. And difficult situation. Fortunately, in-kind response from area community schools. We had counselors on site, social workers on site the next day, and we were able to conduct school. And we did that first day because we knew our kids needed the support from community mental health, from our counselors, and needed to be there. And we didn't do much with curriculum that day, but we did a whole lot of taking care of one another and really for the next several days. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. What are the key elements needed to establish and maintain a good working relationship between you and our board?
That's a great question. I think building trust, transparency, direct and honest communication with one another, that is what's worked in Clinton. And I do work for a very courageous and wonderful board. I'm not just saying that. But one of the things our board president and I have always been together on is that the honesty and transparency, not only for the community, but with each other. And they work very well together. Don't always agree, but we also can agree to disagree with respect and with the idea that we're all working towards a common goal and a common end, and can get there on behalf of kids better if we're working together. Not that we don't all have strong opinions, we all do, and Sometimes the board members are the strongest opinion in the room. Sometimes it's the superintendent. And but I do think that being honest, direct, having those mature, direct conversations and difficult conversations with one another, and spending time where we can build trust is critical. And again, I'm not just saying this. Boards of education right now, you have tremendously hard jobs because of constituents, because of the nature of and climate in our country right now. And so working together on behalf of all kids, I think, takes teamwork and trust.
Thank you.
Thank you.
13.
Okay.
How do you inspire and engage the entire school community in support of the district's vision and mission?
So I think clear messaging and building capacity through whether that's small group, individual discussions, again, that visibility, getting out to community groups. A good example, recent example would be the bond. We passed a $35 million bond in a community that hadn't passed a bond in over 20 years. It's good enough for me, it's good enough for my kids. And we did it during a pandemic. So that took, it's not my ideal to go for a bond during a pandemic, but we were able to do Zoom meetings. When we were able to meet face-to-face, we were able to do so in small groups. So I think that is an example of building capacity and understanding and galvanizing a community that might not have thought they needed to upgrade their facilities, but it passed 3-1.
Thank you. We are going to move on to Trustee Murphy.
Okay, so I have several questions.
Thank you.
First is, what experience and success have you had with closing the achievement gap for economically disadvantaged and minority students?
Okay. So let me start with that. In Clinton's Title I district, and when I got to Clinton in 2016, the elementary school had been declared a focus school. Interestingly enough, so at Hillside, and several years before that in Northville, because of the large achievement gap. I'm not sure of other schools. I think our other elementary school in Northville, 2 elementary schools were focus schools. So I've had experience of moving both of those in both districts, moving off of the focus school designation by targeted intervention, coaching, and a lot of hard work to close those achievement gaps. We continue to endeavor in Clinton to close the achievement gap for our biggest challenge is socioeconomic, and we have a large group. We're able to put a lot of resources into our elementary school, so we have hired not only interventionists, but we also have coaches, and then much of our work through the transformation zone has been to target student achievement for underserved groups.
Great, thank you. Okay, this is question 15.
Okay, thank
Please
you.
give us examples of educational change or reform you have initiated in your career that have led to improvements in student learning.
Okay. Educational reform. It was in Northville. We moved off of the Team Concept Middle School. That's not really an reform initiative, but it was a major change, definitely a second-order change. We implemented the International Baccalaureate Middle Years Program. Again, another second-order change initiative that I've been a part of. In Clinton, I've talked about the mascot, I talked about the bond. Clinton did not have an articulated curriculum And we are continuing to work on that, and that is indeed a first and second order change initiative in terms of reform. I guess the more suburban districts have had more resources and have been able to move more quickly for some of the reform initiatives. The reasoning for the transformation zone work by MDE was to create spots around Michigan that, and we signed up for it in Clinton because we not only did we need to change and improve consistently, but better for us to take the initiative than to have somebody telling us when we had to do that. And so that was a huge piece for buy-in from my team and from the Board of Education. Why are we doing this work, Jim? Why is it important? In a board workshop, I was able to explain why it made sense that all kids can learn, and we need to be, pushing for student growth and achievement for all students, and this work will help us get there. And so those are some.
Thank you. Question 16, how would you meet the needs of college readiness while also providing high-quality, relevant, career-focused opportunities for students?
Well, I'm a big believer in technical education. Lenawee County is an exemplar with their VOTEC Center, and our students are actively involved there. I think opportunities, my earlier story about our students, 3 of the 4 were tech center kids, and we really promote that. There are scholarships and support throughout the community for students going into the skilled trades. We honor those. We actually encourage that. I have had a conversation with a student just last week who is going skilled trades, wants to be an electrician, and we were talking about wiring one of the sheds that we have. And he wants to work with our maintenance department to do that, and wanted to know if I was willing to go along with it. And I was like, absolutely. Of course, we're going to want it inspected, but it'll be okay. So yes, I think for a lot of students, those are options that should be pushed. If we go back to the Michigan Merit Curriculum, 20 years ago, which was, there's those of us who agreed with it and those of us who didn't agree with it. That all, it's nice to say all kids can go to college, but do all kids need to go to 4-year degree? And if they or want to, and having a robust option for them, like the Oakland Skills Center and other skilled trades options, I think it's helpful. Try to find a plumber. Mm-hmm. There's your answer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, question 17, what is the biggest risk you have taken to do what's right for children?
Wow. I wasn't anticipating that question. Give me a second to think about it. I want to go back to early in my career at Star Commonwealth, working with kids who were at risk. A lot of times when kids are in residential care, they're discounted. They're folks out of sight, out of mind. Counties send their kids to placements to get them, to get them out of the way for a while, but hopefully to get treated and so they can come back and be productive citizens. So some of the risks that I took were advocating for students to participate in what would be considered more adventurous activities, like taking them to have them participate in things that would be viewed as like community events, and advocating for students that even though they're in residential care, they still are children, and they need to hit some of those developmental milestones. Some of those could be participating, going on shopping, being allowed to go shop. As simple as that is taking them out to community, taking them to church, and things that matter. I don't know if that's the most risk-taking that I ever took, but in that role, every day I worked at Star, we took risks. Taking kids home sometimes was a risk for them and a risk for us. So I think a more, maybe a different example you're looking for is advocating as a public educator. And I've done that throughout my whole career, and especially for special education kids. Currently, I serve as the chair of the task force for working with students with autism in Lenawee County, and I advocated for a more inclusive environment for those students, and that can be risky because there are those who think that some students should be in center-based programs and some should be fully included. But I've advocated, not just there, but in my previous job, that for full inclusion. So that may be more relevant. I was reaching for that one a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Question 18, what do you believe are currently the biggest challenges with special education in our region, and how should these challenges be addressed?
Yes, opportunities for students with autism. I mean, that's been on my forefront. The great thing about working in Norfolk Public Schools for many years is that center-based programs in Wayne County, very familiar with that. In fact, at Hillside, we housed two center-based programs for students with severe disabilities, and then we also, during my time there, brought in a classroom for center-based for students with autism. The idea is that their age appropriateness for the students to be in a middle school versus being at the Cook Center with older students. We developed a program going back, probably 2000 that we called Building Bridges. I know everybody uses that, but it fit us there because what we would, with the center-based programs, our students would go down daily to interact with the students either via their assisted technology, they're at lunch, to read them stories. My own daughter, Grace, when she was a 6th grader, that is something she wanted to do. She would go down to the classroom and read at lunchtime to students. Now, we primarily did our Building Bridges in 7th grade, but as a 6th grader, try telling your daughter she can't do something. And so what was interesting to watch from her is that her friends would say, where are you going at lunch? Are you in trouble? Are you going to detention? And your dad's the principal. And she's like, no, I'm going to read with a student. I won't say his name. And eventually they go, oh, well, can I go? So those opportunities to get back to your question, I've been a part of and an advocate for my entire career. I started my career working with special populations. And I think regionally, the more that we can do for awareness and opportunity, and also to advocate for support and for dollars. That a lot of that was put forth in the part 1 and part 2 of the Michigan Equity Study, and I'm sure you're familiar with that. But
Yeah.
okay.
Thank you.
Hope that helped.
Move on to trustee Romy.
Finance questions now, no fun ones.
Okay.
Okay, question number 19. Please describe your experience with budget development and financial management. What is the largest budget you have built and maintained?
Okay. So, largest budget, about $13 million, but also managing a $35 million bond. Could you repeat the first question? Because I like the second question better.
Okay. Please describe your experience with
Got
budget
it.
development and
Thank you.
financial management.
So I work very closely. Well, first let me start. My undergraduate background is in economics and management, so I have financial background. And so I was very comfortable working with our business manager when I became superintendent, we worked very closely. We have had clean audits the entire time I've been in Clinton. You can go on our website and go to the transparency page, and you'll see where we started. Our number from Munitrex was about a 4, and we built it back to a 0 in terms of being fiscally responsible, and also being able to track students into our district has helped with our revenue. So I build the budget. In fact, that's what I was doing yesterday, and I'm kind of the final go-through for recommendations, and especially in light of inflation and adjusting for diesel fuel and other things that we have to pay for. So we increase some of those budgets. But again, we do an audit, every year, and always clean, and have really an impeccable reputation in terms of how we handle our finances in Clinton.
Couple more.
Sure.
How would you ensure we maintain a balanced budget that aligns our spending with our priorities?
Strategic plan. In Clinton, our budget decisions are based on alignment with the strategic plan. It's not in the strategic plan, as it's not a priority. So planning responsibly 5-10 years out, that's the model that we've been following, and it works pretty well. I think as we get into some increased costs around some of the bond, we do have some fund balance and general fund dollars that we can rely on to help us. And you never know that when that rainy day fund, it's going to start raining. Well, it's been raining as we've been getting some of our estimates and for projects. And you may be experiencing some of that with the work that you're doing here. So, okay.
And last question, well, for me, what opportunities do you believe budget limitations present? In tough financial times, what are your top 3 priorities?
Classroom, but I know that's not what you want to hear. I think protecting the classroom, obviously safety is there too, actually, maybe flip the 2, and they're both related. And again, service to kids and special services. I think those are the things that I hold on to when I have to make difficult decisions. And I did paint a rosy picture, but I do want to say that when I arrived in my current district, there had been considerable transition at the building level and in central office. And we were losing kids and had a number of years of losing enrollment. And so when I went in to sign my contract at the board meeting, we were laying off. And I also worked in PS at a time where the fund balance had been spent down to an unacceptable level. And I was part of that build back over 10 years for them to get to the place they are now. But I remember those hard decisions, and I've never forgot them, and I took them with me to Clinton. And we did make some hard decisions and began to live within our means more and put our money into marketing a bit, and we were able to attract school choice. We were very fortunate, and then we started seeing some increases, and that helped. And then as our enrollment has grown, and for a small district, this is huge. 200 kids in first 4 years that I were there, and even through the pandemic, we haven't declined, and projections for next year are looking good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Smith is last but not least.
Only 2 more questions, Jim.
Okay.
How would you interact with other administrators in our district? How would you strike a balance between giving them the support and autonomy they need to lead effectively while holding them accountable as appropriate and necessary?
That's a great question. Thank you for that, Trustee Smith. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in my close, but I do appreciate the question because as administrator, as superintendent, I am responsible for holding them accountable. And I don't have a problem doing that. I think, again, that goes to mature, direct conversations and being honest with one another. I've built a very supportive team with my building leads and my department leads. However, we have those difficult discussions when we need to, and being very direct with them. I also I don't believe in micromanagement. I think giving them the support and the direction that they need to be successful, and acknowledging with them when they are being successful, as well as when they need to turn it up a notch and address concerns. So I think it is a balance. I think you nailed it, and that's how I've always operated.
Thank you. How would you assess the current culture and climate of our district, and what would you do to positively impact it?
Thank you. I kind of anticipated that question, and thank you for that. Hard for me to talk about your district when I'm coming from the outside, but I've been close to it for a number of years. You are not unlike Clinton when I arrived. You are experiencing a tremendous amount of transition in your leadership team. So I think that probably has your community going, I know it has your community wondering what's next, because you can see it in social media. So stabilizing, making some good hires and stabilizing that team, being very visible, reassuring the community that we've had some transition here, but we're still Novi Community Schools, which has an impeccable reputation and has done great things for many years. But you're going through a tumultuous time. And when I think back about it, this isn't the only time that Novi has had some transitions. I'm old enough and close enough that I remember the last one, and the one before that with Dr. Lippy. So I do know that these are cyclical and districts go through them. It is absolutely not the end of the world, but those reassurances and communication and direct and honest conversations that, look, we got to get this figured out. So I think that's one, and I think also with the board, in terms of the Board of Education and your next superintendent, are going to need to develop and also project a team of 8 and a united front and develop unity in the Novi community. Not that I tried to rhyme that, but just kind of worked that way. So, I mean, that's an honest answer to I think, an honest question. And that's, from my perception, organizations look differently on the inside than they do the outside. Public perception is different than employee perception. You have an amazing staff here. You have talented building leads and teachers. I know some of the teachers. And I think celebrating that is important. I also think what would help me as a superintendent here is I followed, well, let me tell you a little bit about what I walked into. The 20-year superintendent retired, and they hired a superintendent that lasted 14 months. Then they brought the former superintendent back as the interim. And that's what I walked into. And every building principal had changed in that previous 3 years at least once, some twice. So getting that team together and moving forward, frankly, it's one of the things I'm most proud of in my work in Clinton is the ability to build a team and build a common vision with my team, and then also with the Board of Education.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we would like to take a few minutes now to provide you two things, with an opportunity to ask any questions you may have of the board.
Okay.
And then we will also, we have quite a few minutes remaining, so we'll have an opportunity for you to give any closing remarks or anything you'd like to add.
Okay, I appreciate that. I do have some questions, but I want to make sure that I've got everything where it needs to be here. Here they are. Let me ask, and we don't have to go around, but I guess my first question is, what are you most proud about the Novice schools? And you guys, you can pick somebody to respond, I guess. But
I won't put them on the spot, but I think we all have something to be proud of, so we could easily share.
okay, awesome.
If anybody wants to, or I can go, it doesn't matter.
Our students. Our students.
Yeah, okay.
The number of opportunities that are available to our students.
It's incredible.
I would say our, a couple things, our diverse population of students and families and community members. And then you had already pointed it out, but it's obvious we have an extraordinary group of educators here in our district that we should feel really proud of.
You do.
Educators and building leaders.
Correct.
Okay.
That's what I was gonna say.
Okay.
But we do have a darn good marching band too.
You do. You have an amazing marching band.
I would add on students and just how hard they work. What they accomplish is just amazing. When we have honors night and you think, well, I'll do magna cum laude coming across the stage. And then they list all the volunteer activities and all the other things that these kids do. And that's not really an exception. We just have such hard-working, conscientious kids. And they're just delightful. They're just really, really great.
It's great.
I'd say amen. I guess I'd add our pedigree of leadership.
Okay.
We do have a lot of turnover, but Rockford's a great school district.
It is.
Northville, great school district.
It is.
And Mason. So the fact that 3 of our cabinet members just took superintendent positions, I think speaks highly to the caliber of leadership that we've enjoyed, and probably why we're the #1 school district in Michigan for 2 years in a row.
You were, and lots to be proud of with that. And again, I've long envied your leadership team. I know some of them personally, and as I said before, while you have some challenges right now, this has been a great district for many, many years. So that being said, you asked me what I thought the biggest challenges were. So back at you. What do you think the biggest challenges are?
I'd say one of them is uniting our community. And I don't think that's unique to our community, but, because there's a lot of divisiveness across the nation, but uniting our community behind our school district, I think, is something that I'm hopeful we can achieve.
I think you can do it, honestly.
I think we,
It's doable.
one of our hard coming is uniting our community behind the picks that are gonna happen with our top leadership over the next few months, getting them to accept the leaders.
Great.
I would say, not to go back to the pandemic, but rolling out of there, everybody, adults, community members, local businesses, obviously our students have faced a lot of trauma.
Yes.
And making sure that everybody feels like they can come back into, and it's happening, you can see it happening around, but being in society, functioning at a high level, part of this turnover, I think, is a result of all of that, our societal situations and divisiveness that we have going on. So I think just being cognizant of people are humans, whether you put them on a pedestal of being an amazing student or being an exceptional leader, and just really building those relationships and that trust back up and going into the hard conversations. I've heard some good things over the last couple days, and hard conversations are hard to have.
Yeah, they are.
But-
Indeed, they are.
Not just shying away from them. So I think that that is important and will be important for our next superintendent.
Excellent.
I think that's it.
Thank-
Unless, yeah, I think they're good.
That's it.
Thanks for that. I did have a third question, but I'm gonna shoot from the hip and just kind of make some comments. I've lived here a long time, and so I know some of the folks who work for you, teachers, and folks had reached out to me and said, I was excited to see your name applying for a Novi. And so I countered with, thank you. Can you tell me what you're most proud of in Novi? And and the reason I'm sharing it is that you need to know this. This is what your employees are saying about your district, and maybe you already know it. But the first thing popped was diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I was like, okay, we're congruent there. And then, but the other one is something that I think whoever your next leader is needs to aspire to this, because it was that the leadership values teachers, and that is so huge for an excellent organization. Dr. Matthews' leadership was known throughout the district, and he valued us as employees, and he stood up for us. And that is a characteristic that you should all be proud of, and that you should expect from your next leader. There's some other side notes I thought were kind of cool. The unified curriculum with Atlas Rubicon, which we've been working towards that in. And then, and I remember this is from years ago that, but they mentioned that content area leaders. Well, I remember far enough back when that wasn't embraced initially. And like any major change initiative, it takes time, and it was great to hear from a colleague that, no, this makes a lot of sense, and that kind of validation. So they also talked about instructional coaches. So those are some of the comments, but I wanted to share them with you, and also, kind of frame them in as a response to the question. I do have a 90-day implementation plan and some letters for you that I'd like to. I'll just bring them up to you before I do my my closing, unless you have further questions for me.
No, I think we're good.
Okay, thank you.
Do you guys want one?
You've probably got a few of those this week, I imagine.
Just four.
Yeah. I recognize that this has been a long week for you, and I just want to thank you for your attention and the opportunity. But as I close, I just want to say, as I sat down last night, and I began reflecting on my interest in becoming the superintendent of Novi, my thoughts drifted to this interview, and I shifted my focus to what Novi Board of Education members might be thinking as you prepared for tonight's interview. As a parent, I tried to put myself in your role, and I began thinking about that large list of stakeholder comments and characteristics that is on your website. So I took that list, and I started to list characteristics that were congruent with my values and beliefs and characteristics. And what, if I were sitting where you are, what I would be looking for. And that would be someone with character, who's reasonable, a good administrator, who fulfills strategic goals set by the Board of Education, someone who truly gets teachers and children and enjoys working with students and families, someone who gets excited about leading, someone who can implement strategic plans and district goals to fidelity. That fidelity word, that's the accountability piece. Someone who can stretch resources, a creative instructional leader, and a strong manager. Someone who can promote unity, understands the nuances of the great Novi community, and parental expectations. Someone who can continue the exceptional work of the Novi community. And it's work that you've been doing for years here. Someone who's knowledgeable, with strong abilities, a true leader who can lead by a collaboration, consensus, and from the top down when necessary. Someone who puts true leaders beside them and develops them for leadership roles so that there are good results for children. Team builder. Someone who will listen, actively listen some more, and then act. Someone who's focused, strong, honest, unafraid, and willing to make the tough decisions in the best interest of children. Someone who's with professional and life experiences and who is knowledgeable and comfortable working with all students. Someone who is visible and supports the staff to ensure that Novi graduates students with 21st century skills and prepares them for the world of work, higher education, and service. Someone who's a good communicator and not only professes a passion for public education, but has demonstrated this. Additionally, someone with a caring heart who is passionate about children, passionate about learning, and humanistic. Someone who leads with a heart, a facilitator of stars who can develop talent and bring out the best in others. At my core, I'm still a teacher. At my core, I'm still a counselor and a helper. I like helping people. I like learning from people. Frankly, I like people. And every day, I endeavor to increase my awareness and competence in order to continuously work on improving my leadership and service to children and families. I feel confident and know that I'm a good fit for the Novi Community Schools. I have exceptionally high expectations for myself, and I also have high expectations for others as well, especially those whose life work and daily mission is to foster a positive school culture, those who are dedicated to increase achievement and who are good stewards of the community's money and resources, those who endeavor to guarantee our stakeholders satisfaction and grow the system in Novi so that it continues to be a safe and productive environment to educate and care for our children. What you can expect from me is that I'm not afraid of long-term commitments and that I keep my promises. I believe in trust, I believe in people, and I believe in honesty, integrity, and I believe in accountability for myself and for my team. I expect people to be trustworthy, and I expect people to do their best, and people can expect me to be fair and encourage them to help each other and treat one another with respect. I also expect to deliver. I also expect the Board of Education to hold me accountable for these expectations. And please know, I embrace all of these expectations for myself and my team. I want to thank each and every one of you, your leadership team, for the wonderful tradition and exceptional accomplishments of the Novi Community Schools, and the teachers, members of the community support staff who make up Novi Community Schools. If they're listening, you've got a great system here and have for many years. I'm hopeful you learn more about me and my commitment and vision for public education and the Novi Community Schools tonight. And I just want you to know, I am truly grateful for this opportunity to speak with you and share a little bit about myself. And I do wish you the best in the difficult decision that you have before you, and the work that you do as a Board of Education. So, on that, thank you very much. And
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Craycraft, we appreciate your interest in the superintendent position for Novi Community Schools. The board is interviewing 6 candidates this week, as you know. Tonight is the last night, so we will let you know Thursday evening where you stand in our search process.
Thank you.
Thank you for participating in our first round interviews.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate you.
You.
Thank you. Oh, really? Oh, I mean it.
I mean it, thank you.
Thank you.
are on my nerves.
Okay, whoever sets the seating up,
I
you
know.
gotta
Wow,
break those two up.
it's him.
Okay, we just want to make sure you had a minute to get ready.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good evening. On behalf of Novi Community School District, I would like to welcome Carol Diglio to this interview for the position of superintendent. Ms. Diglio is currently Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources for Oak Park School District in Oak Park, Michigan. I will take a few minutes to briefly describe our format. The interview may take up to 90 minutes. There will be 23 questions from the board. Toward the end of the interview, time permitting, we will give you the opportunity to ask questions of the board and make a closing statement. We will let you know if time is becoming an issue and there is a need to pick up the pace for the responses. We have a big clock up here to my left. For those watching this interview, we welcome your feedback. Those watching virtually may use the link provided for this purpose. Those present may use either the QR code or paper form provided. Although the task of choosing our next superintendent is the responsibility of the Board of Education as the elected representatives of our community, we value and seriously consider the input of our stakeholders in this process. So we will begin, and I will start. Ms. Diglio, while we have had the opportunity to review your application materials, audience members have not. Please briefly review your background and share what causes you to be interested in this position at this point in your career.
Thank you very much. I'm happy and thrilled to be here. I started my education back in 1989 when I graduated from Central Michigan University and did my student teaching at Churchill High School. And from there, like many educators at the time, I subbed for 2 years and waited tables and worked at Joe Louis Arena and did lots of odds and ends and coached. And I also subbed in the Novi Community School District a few times during that period. In 1991, I went to a job fair and got an opportunity to go to Houston, Texas. I was in an urban school district, a very large school district, one of the largest in the country. And I worked there for 2 years with an underserved population of students, learned a tremendous about equity and doing what's right for kids. And after 2 years in Texas, I came back and thought I was going to go into the police academy, but then I got a call to coach here in Novi and ended up getting an alternative education position at the Bentley Center, where we served 18 different school districts, mostly kids that were kicked out of their schools for behavior reasons, and served there for 2 years, taught 6 different preps, worked with I would normally say behavior issues, but they weren't behavior issues. I think when you truly care about kids and show that right away, they want to learn and perform for you. So after 2 years there, I went into the business world for less than 6 weeks because then Novi called me again and said that they had a health position. Ms. Donna Romer was moving from health education over to the counseling office. And so it did not take me long to think about business. After 6 years of trying to land in a Novi Community School District or similar district, I ended up getting a job here. While it was part-time, I did lots of other things, chaired on committees, I continued to coach. I was the class sponsor for the class of 2001, I think. And eventually that job went full-time. After 8 years of teaching, here in Novi, I was offered the opportunity to be the Dean of Students when we had Dean of Students. And so I was a Dean of Students for, I think, 4 years, which then morphed into assistant principal as we had an assistant principal leave in October of that year, my final year as a dean. But because of the recession and the budget cuts, we didn't replace that. So I kind of played both of those roles, took on the master schedule and additional leadership opportunities during that time. And then in 2010, I was named the high school principal, one of my favorite jobs here in Novi, and what an outstanding building and lots of great teachers still there today and leaders. So I was the building principal during one of the most, I think, difficult times. Some of you here may remember being on the board at that time, or at least parents. It was during the recession. We had massive cuts at every level. We lost our department chairs. We reduced staff by 8%. At the high school, we were on a 4x4 block, which was one of the most expensive schedules at the time to run, and we had to shift back to a six-period day, and also lose an opportunity for kids to have their seminars. We increased class size by 4, but didn't change the contract. So the class sizes could go up more than 4 children, but that meant that we didn't change the contract, which led to very expensive overages and other problems that quickly got solved with a lot of collaboration with that staff. It was also the year that we were tasked to launch IB in the district. So the IB program was launched in 2010. Teacher evaluation laws changed. Teacher tenure law changed. And there was a lot of, I think, unrest, not just here in Novi, but across the country. And it was really a significant time in my leadership where I learned very quickly to bring people together. And there were a lot of tears that year, but a lot of collaboration and honest conversations, and really had to turn the mindset of all this is happening to us, but how do we capitalize it and make it work for kids? And that staff was amazing. So we would answer 3 questions whenever we were tasked. Losing seminar was one of them. What's working, what's not, and how do we get there? IB was a difficult transition just because of a transition of everything. What's working, what's not, and how do we get there? So that became our little engine with everything. And so it took our mindset from, we have a lot going on, a lot of change, and how do we make this better? Let's focus on what's positive, because there's so many things going great. And let's focus on what really is not working, and then take that smaller list and really focus on what are the things we can do to be proactive and get things in the right direction. So while I was at the high school and loving my job, I was asked to come to Human Resources during the Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources was leaving late winter, early spring, and so I was asked to come up to central office and do some real intentional work around systems for human resources. Dr. Matthews saw that we were going to have to hire 34 teachers the following year, and he wanted a much more robust and systematic hiring process. So I stayed back spring break and worked on that, and along with other very needed systems, so that a central office is serving the buildings all the same way. And so when I came up to central office, I did that for 6 months while I was providing support at the high school. I studied to graduation, senior honor night, all that fun stuff. I didn't want to give up my evaluations. Nicole Carter supported me on my day-to-day duties, and we did it together. And then I applied for the job once it was posted and ended up being named the Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, where I continue to do the work of putting in very transparent and clear systems for the district to operate and serve our community the best they can. One example is the school health protocols. When you have 5 elementaries and a 5th, 6th, and a middle school and a high school, and now we have virtual, and you have all these different programs. Just the simple thing of how we manage school health and medication. If I'm a parent and I have a child in elementary, middle school, and high school, and they all have inhalers, but we have 3 different ways we process that, that is not good for our community and our customer service. So one of my favorite committees to work with were all the administrative assistants across the districts, and bringing them together in this building and using their thought process and what they felt every day to build something that is probably still in place today. And I know as far as Nurse Kathy, she is probably running it very similar. So I was here for 4 years, had lots of opportunities to work in other areas and continue that system mindset of supporting and growing leaders in the building. After 3.5, almost 4 years, I decided to retire. And my thought process for that is I saw a real need for intentional support for leaders in the buildings and districts. The job of education has grown so immensely. And what we learn at school is very useful, but on the job, boots on the ground is very different. So I shifted a little bit, and I'm a huge advocate of education on all levels, and I really wanted to support that. And I ended up getting hired by MASA and MASSP to write blogs, to work with leaders. I got a certification to become a mentor. I was able to go to different school districts around the state, the west side to Muskegon. I went down to Anchor Bay and brought leadership development to their entire administrative staff, or people would come to me in Lansing where I would partner with Troon Law. They would do their part of the legal part of a policy, and then I would come in the back end and show how to implement it, how to put it in place. Hands-on workshops. I loved it. But a good friend of mine took her first superintendent job in Oak Park. And it is a district with tons of potential, but had high needs. She walked into a position that didn't have immediate support, and she needed human resources. So she asked me to come and support her staff and her during the transition. That was supposed to be about 3 weeks, and this October will be 3 years. So I continued the work in very, very similar, but on a much deeper level, working with systems in the district, building the human resources. They had not had a human resource person, dedicated persons, for over 10 years. I'm on the critical shortage list, and that's why. I created a small but mighty team that works really hard, got to know the staff during the global pandemic because I got hired in the fall of 2019, and then we shut down in March of 2020 and didn't come back until this last fall. So it's been a lot of getting to know people through a screen, which is difficult, but it can happen. It gave us opportunity to pause and build things out and train. So I've been doing that for the last couple years at Oak Park, and working through difficult contracts and trying to build trust within the union groups. I continue to work there today and support them the best I can. That brings me to here. And I'm excited to be here. I think I'm prepared myself well for this role and this position. And I would greatly work extremely hard to be back in the Novi Community School District.
Thank you.
Yep.
What are the most immediate challenges you would expect to face as our superintendent? Given these, tell us how you would hit the ground running on your first day and be ready to address these challenges.
It's a great question. So I did prepare a 30, 90, 60, 90-day process, and I will leave that with you. I wrote that all down. But the immediate thing is to stabilize people. And when I use the word stabilize, there's some big pieces that are some big pieces of institutional knowledge that are leaving soon. And so making sure that those relationships stay intact so that we can do a smooth transition. I understand that you've hired an assistant superintendent of academics, so I would quickly and swiftly meet that individual. I would certainly make sure I touch base with Greg and get to know him so that we start assembling our cabinet. And through that start looking at the year and allowing that year that first month is all about one-on-one. The most important meeting I would have is with Dr. Ruskin. As the board president, I think it's so critical, and I think it's so healthy and very possible to have an extremely healthy relationship with the Board of Education and the community leaders, or the school leaders. It has to be that way, and it has to be that way for children. So that would be one of my first meetings. And then after talking with Dr. Ruskin, I would ask her and make sure that it's okay for me to meet individually with all the board members. And we start that discussion, and I get a pulse on things that way. I then would have a team meeting with the ESB, talk about transitions, learn quickly about summer programmings and summer work that's going on. I also would then go to all the directors and see what they have moving during the summer and what's going on. Some of those key directors, I'd want to talk with Mike Dragoo and have Greg back in the meeting to talk about the bond and what big projects are going on currently, and are they on schedule? Are we on budget? Are they moving along? And then I would do a home visit to all the schools. So I would make sure that I have a meeting with all the building principals, and if they have assistant principals that they'd like to invite, they are more than welcome. But I would sit with the assistant principals in their buildings, take any tours of new things that I may not be aware of in the past 4 years, and work closely with Ms. Holly to get this calendar up, because that's going to be about 32 meetings in the month of July. And then one thing right away, I'm really big on presence of communication, websites, anything in print, anything that we have that communicates to the stakeholders, the parents. All the names have to be correct on the website. Things have to be updated. It's not unusual through COVID to have things a little outdated because of just the madness of what everyone has gone through. So I would get to know George really quickly as well, and have him start working on that presence of the transition so that there's no confusion. Make sure that next fall is ready to go in terms of calendar. The student calendar is posted. I see that you're starting September 6th. So that would be my immediate boots on the ground and start going.
Thank you. Given your research on our district, what do you believe are the 2 or 3 most critical long-term priorities we will need to address, and how would your background and skills help us address these priorities?
So I think communication is always a big one. And whether that's communication with the district and the board, communication from the central office to buildings, and so on. I think that any organization can benefit from better communication, clearly defined processes and procedures that are well communicated. And I would really like to talk with the board about that. Like, that would be a priority for me as far as like a strength of how do we best communicate with each other, and how do I best communicate with all of my leaders here in the district. The other thing is I would love to make this magically happen in all districts, not just Novi, but I think we've done tremendous work to support kids that are academically soaring. And we do tremendous work to support kids that have other abilities. I'd like to see us go towards our kids that may not want to go to college for 4 years, may want a 2-year degree, or may want to go towards trades, or may want to go towards certifications or the military. And when the Michigan Merit Curriculum changed, that's another thing that happened in 2010, we crippled our elective courses and our students' ability to have a chance to explore what are they good at and what do they really like. And I believe in understand the Michigan Merit curriculum, but prior to 2010, we went from 1 credit hour required by the state to 18 credit hours required by the state. So what that did is it changed the trajectory of what our kids were able to take in schools, and it put a lot of our classes that students love and thrive. And for some kids, that's why they come to school, because they get to do what they love to do. And I remember talking with our elective teachers, I'm going to put these on life support, meaning you might have to teach Art 1 and 2 at the same class, because I don't want to shut things down. When you shut things down, they tend to go to waste completely. So one of the challenges I would say is how do we work with the state? And I was able actually to meet with the state superintendent before he passed on the incubator class that's at the high school, and to be more innovative about how do we get these classes in, but kids can still earn their English and math credit when they're juniors and seniors instead of taking English and math classes prescribed. And so we went up to, I got a meeting. It took a lot of persistence, but R.J. Weber and Dr. Matthews and I drove up to the state and had a conversation with them. If you could do it there, where else? What are other pockets that we can do more of the robotics during the school day, more bringing auto mechanics back to the school day, and not necessarily having our kids go out of district to do that? And that's one thing I would love to see.
Thank you. What specific qualities and capabilities do you bring to this position that may set you apart from others?
I think I'm really good at going towards uncomfortable situations. When you're in the people business, which we are, 0 to 26 in our schools, right? We start early with the babies and all the way through 26, and then all the adults. So when you have 922 staff members and 7,000 students, times all of the parents and the community at large, there's got to be someone that unites people and is not uncomfortable going towards conflict. So I think one of my strengths is uniting people, even during the rocky times, or whether it's a recession, whether it's cuts, whether it's change in direction of curriculum, whatever those challenges may be, people are going to come with their emotions, but we have to soundly get back to why we're here, and that's for kids. And so I'm really good at reminding people of that and saying what is best for kids in this situation. And I think that's a unique ability I have, and I've been working at it for many, many years.
Thank you. We are going to now turn over to Trustee Cook to ask some questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, maintaining healthy relationships with school and community stakeholders is important to the Board of Education. Please share with us how you have gone about building and maintaining successful relationships with all members of the school community.
I think the key really in a role like the superintendent is visibility. I think making sure that you're out and about in the community. And I think I know there's layers of people that we need to really make sure we're fostering great relationships, even outside of the district. And those are our community stakeholders, like our mayor. It's important that there is relationships with the police, especially with all of the things we see going on in schools. And that's always been a strong relationship, and the city manager, and making sure that we're truly about community. There are moments where I don't feel like I've left here, because the relationships that I made, I still have them. People reach out to me in times of need or questions or advice, and vice versa. When I need expertise in those folks, my networking has always remained strong. But the how is really just being present and letting people know how get to know each other on a personal level. It's angry to be mad at someone for a long time if you know them personally, and if you get to know them as an individual and what they stand for. So it's really just getting that personal level and being visible and available at times. One thing I know is really important, especially in the first couple months, is setting up meet and greets. Even though school's not happening, how can I get out or offer time in to get to know not only a new superintendent, but also a new team? So making those opportunities available to all people and using different facets of communication is really important as well.
Thank you. Next, how do you think various stakeholders such as parents, staff members, and community members should be involved in our planning process in setting the direction of the district?
They should be involved. It's public education, and it's also a community school. I know there's levels of involvement. So there are mandates that we have to all follow. The Michigan Merit Curriculum is one of those mandates. There's also, I see planning so beneficial on levels with the parent groups and communities, with all of the after-school activities, sporting events, and things like that. Having committee work and how we're going to celebrate and elevate kids is a great way to bring families together and be part of the planning. I think the bond is a real important way of having community input. The meetings that are made available to stakeholders to identify where the bond should, how the bond should be prioritized and where that should go. And I think there's other levels that welcome that ability to help in planning. I do think that there are other levels where professionally teachers and administrators are hired to do parts of their jobs that may not, having feedback is welcome, listening is important, but sometimes doing our job, we have to do our job. So there's, I think, lots of different layers of where you can have input and stakeholder planning, you can have input and feedback, and you can have a level where we have to plan and present a plan and say, this is what we're doing, and please support us on what we're doing. So there's lots of different levels.
Okay. Thank you. Effective and timely communication is vital to the success of a school district. Please describe the type of communication students, staff, parents, and the board should expect to receive from you.
A very regular communication. And I think that one of the important things with working with Dr. Ruskin and the board is, what do you feel like you need in terms of communication? I think communication for me is one of my strengths, but I think that we have to give, whether it's weekly or monthly, updates, newsletters, s'mores, updates. So here's what's going on information. There's times where we have to give critical information on the spot, and there has to be a process for that information. So school closings, emergency situations in the district, we have to have a format for that communication. I would also work with all of the building administrators to make sure there's consistent communication going out from the buildings so that we're not repeating stuff. I don't want to send something and the administrators are sending the same thing. So that's where, in that first question we talked about communication, it's got to be a process for communication. So it's critical for me to return information on a personal level. And so different ways I do that, and I was just doing it here before I walked in, is making sure I follow up on phone calls, email people back, I evaluate who needs information immediately so that they can move forward on their job or forward on their decision? And what are the things that I can wait on for, the end of the night? Is this something I have to respond to immediately? Is this something I can do at home once I sit down and get back with people? And you have to evaluate things on a critical level to decide how and when they get communicated out.
Thank you. We're going to move on to trustee Hood.
Okay, thank you. As our superintendent, how would you advocate for political action that benefits our district and public education throughout our state?
The way I got my job with MASA and MASSP was advocating for education, and that was through Twitter. I think we have to be advocates for the profession, making sure that we are pushing to honor the profession with a critical shortage. I mean, when you have 54 different positions on the critical shortage list, that's terrifying. And so I would do that through associations, MASA, the Oakland County Soups Association, MDE. I would make sure that I am, bless you, that I am up to date with what is going on, that I'm a positive voice, and representing the district in a positive way. And when I'm representing the district, I'm also representing the profession. So it's really about networking, and when there's call to action for school districts and superintendents, being part of that call of action or call to action. And you have to be an active member to make sure that our kids are kept a priority, because they deserve the very best educators. And it's about our teachers, our administrators, our paraprofessional, our bus drivers. All those areas are scarce. You cannot drive by a district and not see hiring bus drivers. It is something that, one of the things that inspires me about this role is to be an advocate even more so, and use my voice.
Okay, thank you. Superintendents are often faced with the challenge of making decisions when there is no clear right answer, and members of the community are split on the right plan, the right path forward, Talk about a time when you were faced with a difficult decision where you knew there would be a group of people unhappy with your decision, whichever way you decided. How did you go about making that decision and getting people on board with the direction you determined was best?
That happens every day. It does happen often. And so the best way of looking at the decision and how to go about it is making sure that you're hearing all parties, and keeping kids at the center of that decision making, and what is best for the district as a whole. You learn quickly that, especially in leadership, you're not going to make everybody happy, but can we unite people to be on the same page and push things forward to benefit all? And that can be really difficult to do. I think if I go back to a specific example that you're asking for, Ms. Hood, is in the high school, when I was an assistant principal, I knew that when we transitioned from a 4x4 block to a 6-period day, we had to align all of our curriculum and our assessments and how we did our work. And I saw that starting to happen because on the 4x4 block, you had a semester and you earned your full credit. But going back to the 6-period day, I might have Miss Hood for Biology 1 first semester, but then I might have Mr. Cook for Biology 1 second semester. And if we weren't aligning and measuring things the same way, that was going to be very difficult. So I asked John Lawrence if I could start having meetings with the staff about this, and they were on very different sides. But working through it and getting their voice and breaking them up by content and figuring it out, how they were going to align not only their assessments and their curriculum, but also how they were going to grade, made things challenging at the time. But when we made the transition, we were positioned well to carry it out. And so I am okay with making decisions, but I have to have also input for a lot of those decisions that are going to impact kids and teachers. If it's just me saying we're going to do it this way, that's not good for anybody. So making sure that you get input and voice, have time to circulate that in your own mindset, bringing them in the same room if we can, that is so critical. Again, people are much kinder when they're face to face than when they're behind a screen or a tablet or a phone. That's when you get the real work done. So bringing people in the same space.
Okay, thank you. Question number 10.
Okay?
Please share specific ways that our district should work with other districts to support learning for all students.
I think when you have the different networks we have, so, we have our set superintendent networks, the academic folks have their networks and associations. I am a believer that you learn from others. I learn from others every single day. And observing others in action is the best way to do that. So not only, and a good way of getting that off the ground is to share different challenges you might have in your own building and say, we are struggling with this. Our PLCs are discussing X and we're struggling with this, but we're really strong here. And when you have people having those conversations together like that, and you have forums where you share that, then you do exchange systems where you get to go and visit each other's schools and see it in action. And that could be so powerful, not only on the curriculum side, but the student activity side, the student engagement side, leadership side, athletic side, fine arts side. We do need to get out of our own spaces. And I felt like Novi has been very good at that. This district's very good at sharing and very good at wanting to seek more ways of doing things to meet all the needs of all kids. And you have to share. I give the cow away all the time. If I don't care. If it's going to make another school or another district benefit, by all means, let me help. Because you know what happens? When you make a phone call, when you need something, they respond. And you have to have that teamwork and network across the district.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We are going to move on to questions from trustee Mena.
Okay, so this is number 11.
Okay.
Out of 23.
Okay?
What is the most difficult decision you've had to deal with in your educational career, and how was it resolved?
Hard for me to talk about my most difficult because it's personnel things, so I can try and do it on a broader spectrum. I think I know when things are difficult because I have a really strong gut. Like it will physically manifest itself in my stomach and make things really hard. But there was, there's been a lot of tough decisions. So I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with one. I would say making a direct decision to make changes at the high school when we lost our department chairs. I made the decision to try and build something differently. So I just took the department chair roles and I broke it up and communicated to everyone in the summer that we lost our department chairs, but this is what we can do to make sure all these things happen. This was also a really good learning lesson. So I made this decision, and less than 30 minutes before my opening meeting of that staff meeting, the union reps came down and said, this isn't going to fly. And I said, well, tell me why. And they told me why, and they had good reason. And so I had to make a different decision within seconds before opening the school year, to make a decision on the fly to go in a different space and just put that on hold. And that was difficult because I knew the business and work of every department still had to continue, but I didn't have these folks, and I felt like the staff had already gone through enough changes that I had to figure out something where I could help or supplement in a different way. And that was hard because, you know, I didn't expect to get that response. And so I had to step back and not take it personally. And I had to put my shoes in their feet and think about all the things and changes that they had gone through, including a new leader, right? Including a new principal and all of these changes. And when they saw that, that was a decision I made that was hard to figure something out, but it forced me to make an even harder decision that I think was the better outcome. And I'm glad they came to me. And I learned a lot from that.
Okay, what are the key elements needed to establish and maintain a good working relationship between you and the board?
Communication. Frequent communication and a clear and transparent mode of communication. So are they weekly updates? Are they high-profile personnel communications where if something's happening in a day where I feel like you need to be aware of this, emergency situations, and having some real deep conversation around, and I don't like the term, so it's for lack of better terms, but sort of ground rules of what we expect from each other, and things that we live by as our mode of operation as a team, because it is so critical right now in education to operate as a team, a united front. And in those elements with communications, specific mode of communications, and having expectations for each other, we have to make sure that when we are living it out every other Thursday, that we look united. We're not always going to agree on things. That's not possible. We have huge jobs and huge responsibilities as superintendent and as the board. And I think we need to give each other grace when it comes to those levels of responsibility, and make sure that we're always assume positive intent before making assumptions of other things. It really is about communication. And I'm not trying to simplify it, but I do believe if we have that down, we're going to be okay.
Okay, 13. How do you inspire and engage the entire school community in support of the district's vision and mission?
Make sure it's visible in the whole district, visible by staff, students. Make sure that there are core values that allow all the stakeholders, including students, to live into that. I am not a believer of putting something on a piece of paper and calling it our mission and vision. It has got to be what we live into. And I am very comfortable and love the mission and vision of this district and your beliefs and your goals. It is why people move here. What you are living into as a district is why you have a thriving community that embraces different cultures, different ethnicities, diversity. It's stated in your mission and vision, and you want kids to prepare well here so that they can go on and be leaders at the next level. So it has to be visible, it has to be stated, it has to be core values in the buildings, it has to be what we base our decisions on. Let's go back. If we're at odds of what we want to do or how we want to move, what is our mission and vision? What are our belief systems of each other and our kids? What is it? Let's go back to the basics. Let's go back to what we agreed upon, because that's not easy. Those are long-range plans. That's a lot of work. Let's go back to that and live into it. That's a great question, and I'm a firm believer of making sure that it is known everywhere.
Thank you. We are going to move on to Trustee Murphy for the next questions.
Okay. What experience and success have you had with closing the achievement gap for economically disadvantaged and minority students?
Well, I get to speak directly to that right now in my current situation. I'm in a school district where our kids are about 3.5 grades below grade level. And the work that needs to be done in different environments is to make sure that we are always teaching and supporting the whole child and making sure that there are folks in place to do so. So in a school, in where I am right now, there's a gen ed and special ed social worker, a school psychologist, a Title I teacher, an instructional coach, a principal, counselors. You have to have the right people in place to make sure that the basic needs of children are being met, their emotional, social needs. And when I say basic needs, in any district, there are going to be kids that aren't even having their basic needs met. To make sure that our basic needs are being met so that kids can learn. And so I love to brag about this principal. You all knew her. Her name's Kim Regina. She was a principal here in this district. And coming off of pandemic has increased student growth by 25%. And why and how did we do that? We gave her the people she needed. And she is a leader for not just the building, but an instructional leader in the classroom. And we make sure that she has what she needs to do what she has to do. And it's that simple. You know, we talk a lot about social emotional learning and making sure we take care of the whole child. And that's really how you close the achievement gap, is make sure that you're taking care of the whole child on every level, including their learning needs. But for years, we've been cutting social workers. For years, we've been cutting school psychs. For years, we've been cutting the very people that we need. We said years ago, we're not going to have affective goals anymore, not teaching kids responsibility, how to be kind to each other, all that stuff. And now we're seeing what impact that has on children. So to close the achievement gap, one, you have to identify it, and you have to own it. You have to use data to drive your instructional decision-making at the ground level, at the classroom level. You have to work in teams, and you have to ignite whole teams and make sure your buildings are supplied with whole teams, so that if learning is hard for me today because this went on at home, I have someone that can help give me that break or that relief and get me back to where I need to be so that I can academically learn.
Thank you. Next question. Please give us examples of educational change or reform you have initiated in your career that have led to improvements in student learning.
Change and reform. A few things happened simultaneously when we lost the department chairs. That was an opportunity to work with Dr. Weber and identify the content area leaders and the grade area leaders. At the same time, we started really diving deep into professional learning communities. And bringing those two groups together, your content area leaders and using them as leaders, academic leaders and instruction leaders in the building, and simultaneously working on grading and alignment of assessment. And I know that sounds like a lot. This was a course of 2 or 3 years. Being intentional to identify those things, and then every staff meeting, every department meeting, every PLC meeting, that's what we focused on. We didn't keep throwing new stuff in the pot. We said, this is what we need to do to get and make change in the classroom. And aligning that was hard, but one of my greatest moments was walking into the science PLC and seeing that group dissecting the question of a test where kids were, over the course of several classrooms, this one question was driving them nuts. And so they were discussion. Discussion was, is it a well-written question? Are we teaching it with continuity across all of our classrooms? So they were drilling down to that reform of what needed to happen to elevate the teaching and learning in the classroom, the most important space. And the teachers were doing the work. That, I applaud them over and over again, because that was a heavy lift for 3 years straight. It was the focus of every meeting we came together on, was making movement towards getting better at that craft.
Okay, next question. How would you meet the needs of college readiness while also providing high-quality, relevant, career-focused opportunities for students?
So that is curriculum. Making sure that we have a challenging, robust curriculum and choices, and not just at the high school, at the middle school, at the elementary school, all the way down to preschool. Making sure that kids have opportunity to push themselves. One of the things that I was always in awe here is summer school was not reform in Novi. It was to get the credits so we can get to the higher levels. So I think there's a lot of that. The on-ramps of making sure that kids have choice with AB and IB. I know you have capstone and the diploma program here, but one thing I would back out of a little bit is, are our on-ramps to get there equitable? Do we see kids that want to get there? Are they getting there? And if they're not, what are we doing to help them get there? I'm a huge proponent of curriculum, kids driving curriculum in terms of their needs and wants. So you're asking about college readiness. If I want to go to a 4-year university, my chances going to school in Novi Community School District is amazing. And not only are you going to go to your school of choice, you're going to excel. But then there's what we talked about earlier, a group of kids that may not want that, and they want to go towards a career or a trade. And that's an area I think we have a niche to go towards, to make sure that we're providing really another layer of opportunity for kids that maybe not be college ready. There's a lot of gap year kids out there now. And so you can't just take a year off, not go to school, not work, what are we doing for that choice? How are we preparing kids? How are we getting them out in the community to see different career choices? If we all pulled out a course catalog from when we went to college and then pulled out a course catalog today, it's going to look vastly different. Are our schools reflecting the careers? Or are we still in a very traditional mindset of what we offer? And so that's curriculum again. And when we teach curriculum, how are we connecting our curriculum to career opportunities? we're learning this today because it can be connected here out in the field. Coding is one of the things that is a little bit of a phenomenal thought to me, and you don't need a 4-year degree to be a coder. You just need to learn how to code, and if you have that coding brain, we need to give you the tools and the on-ramp of doing that. I know we got rid of, most schools got rid of basic typing classes, right? Why don't we have coding in replace of type? Like everyone should know how to code. There's careers all over the place for that. So there's things that you can do, and really it starts with student interest and making that connection in the community of what different careers are out there, and making sure that our curriculum is reflective of the skill sets kids need in those job settings.
Okay. Question 17. What's the biggest risk you've taken to do what's right for children?
That's a really good question. Risk have I taken? I like risk and challenges, so I'm trying to. I think you have to take risks for kids to get what they deserve and want and need. God, I've never been stumped this much. Very good question. I would go back to my health curriculum days. I didn't see it as a risk, but there's always going to be controversy around reproductive health and what's taught in health classes. There's always going to be concerns about how deep do we go on things. But while I didn't recognize that as a risk, I understood that not everyone came from the mindset, but I knew that we had to do what was in the best interest of students and families to make sure we were teaching kids all different ways to protect themselves, whether it was mental health, drugs and alcohol, reproductive health, HIV and AIDS, and really having a comprehensive curriculum that was based on decision-making. And knowledge is power, and so that's what we base it on. We're informing you not to increase your risks as a child, but we're informing you so that you have the information to make decisions, sound decisions for yourself, your health, and your well-being. And to recognize when you're not well, and to be an advocate for yourself. There was some challenging times when I was a teacher, and there were some risks that I pushed or made sure that we were doing what was right by students at that time.
Okay, thank you. I have another question.
Okay.
What do you believe are currently the biggest challenges with special education in our region, and how should these challenges be addressed?
Staffing, the largest challenge, and I'm living it right now in my current district, is making sure that we have people who are certified, qualified, trained to serve our students with different abilities. And we've been trying different ways. I'm very in tune with the state with alternative programming and ways to get certified. Some of that happens so fast and furious, it's hard for people to make decisions. This last fall, they said, if you have this certification, you're willing to do this, you then have to enroll in classes by this time, and it costs this much money. And so sometimes we come up with solutions that really aren't solutions, but it is staffing. It is figuring out how do we, at a young age, inspire young people. And I think we do some really great things here, but inspire young people not only to go into education, but to go into special education and get endorsements in ASD, emotional, impairment, CI, LD, all of that. We have to start kids younger to train them and to get them to fall in love with helping all kids with abilities. And that pipeline has to grow. It is staffing.
Okay.
Thank you. We're going to move on to trustee Rhodey.
Getting ready to talk about finances. Question 19. Please describe your experience with budget development and financial management. What is the largest budget you have built and maintained?
So I have been involved in that from an assistant superintendent perspective. So I have never personally built a budget, but I'm very familiar with school finances and budgeting. Someone who has served as the chief negotiator in this district and in my current district, I have to understand the budget. So it really is making sure that I am lockstep with the CFO or whatever the finance director, whatever the different titles are in the districts, and being very involved with how the budget is built and what our fund equity is at and how things are spent. It's hard because we value staff and we want to pay them what they deserve. But we're also, the things that come into play with that are the school aid, school funding from the state, enrollment, and that is how you get your budget. And then when your budget is 85% staff, and we're a nonprofit entity, you have to be very careful on how you budget. Making sure that kids have what they need at the building, supplies, paying all of the different, schools are multi-layered. Transportation, service, security, all of that are very important. So I'm very familiar with budgeting. I've never built the budget, but I understand it and have worked closely with CFOs, especially during negotiations.
Thank you. Question 20. How would you ensure we maintain a balanced budget that aligns our spending with our priorities?
So that budget needs to be amended and looked at frequently. Spending has to be prioritized. So you have to look at what are the requirements, right? What must we have, and what do we want? They're two different things. And prioritize how that spending is happening, and also understanding the differences and helping the community understand the differences between sinking fund and bonds and the different types of money and where they come from. Money allocated for special education is different than money allocated for general education. So you have to understand all those pots. Our community has to understand all those pots. And there has to be discussion about what our priorities are in that spending. And what's comfortable from a Board of Education's perspective as far as your fund equity. What are you comfortable as a board of where that bottom line is? Communication in that area is critical.
Thank you. 21. What opportunities do you believe budget limitations present? In tough financial times, what are your top 3 priorities?
So budget limitations oftentimes come at the worst times, right? So budget limitations can put a constraint on staffing, especially since that's the majority of where the budget is spent. If I go backwards and say priorities, one, I want class sizes that are manageably small financially. I really believe, especially coming off of the global pandemic, I know Novi did not suffer learning loss like some other districts, but when you have class sizes that are stuffed full of kids and it's budget, that's where budget constraints come in. I don't think it's great for kids. Having kindergarten classes that are high, first grade classes, even high school classes. You know, you truly have to get to know your students to be able to get them comfortable in an environment to learn. And when there's too many kids in there, that makes it difficult. So class sizes are critical, and the teaching and learning, making sure that the day-to-day operations from the district perspective and at every building are happening, that we can afford those we're keeping the lights on, right? And we're making sure that the operational side of things are taken care of in maintaining opportunities for kids. You know, things being cut out in learning opportunities or after-school activity opportunities being cut because of budget, that's hard for me to swallow. Like, the last thing for me when I prioritize these things is to keep the budget constraints the furthest away from student learning. And that can be tricky, but that's my priorities.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to the last two questions. Trustee Smith.
Carol, how would you interact with other administrators in our district? How would you strike a balance between giving them the support and autonomy they need to lead effectively while holding them accountable as appropriate and necessary?
So my greatest way of supporting people is to have clear and transparent expectations. I don't think it's fair to hold people accountable if they don't know what that accountability or expectation is. So my support is working with building administrators to identify what we stand for as leaders and what are our non-negotiables as leaders, so that there is clear expectations of what their jobs and responsibilities are, and making sure that I support them in being as clear as possible with those expectations. They have got to have the autonomy to be themselves and run their buildings. We talked earlier about communication, and there's different ways of communicating. If I was to say, let's figure out the best way to make sure we keep our parents informed, and think about parents in the perspective of having kids across multiple buildings. And that gets to be daunting if they're getting the same information or then no information at all. So how do we align that and have an expectation for communication? So it may be that I want to make sure that parents are communicated on a bi-weekly basis in some written format. The autonomy then is make it fun and use your personality to communicate in the way that you think it's going to be effective and meet the needs of your parent group. So they have to be able to operate their building with autonomy and make decisions on the spot. And I have to instill and empower them with that autonomy so that they don't worry about what's going to happen if I make the wrong decision. We make mistakes, but they have to have the autonomy to do what's in the building. It's in the moment decisions that they are making a lot of the time. So there's going to be clear expectations, and I'm going to support them with that, but I have to allow them to run their buildings to meet the needs of their students, their grade levels, the personality of the communities they create in the building. And then I hold them accountable by when I recognize that they're not doing what's expected, making sure that we start the conversation early and together, and make sure that when we have those discussions, we're clear on the expectations again. And it starts out in a very nurturing way, but then it is if the performance is not there, then I do my part to hold them accountable to that performance. And that can look in lots of different ways. Evaluation, discipline, but if I'm building the right relationships with the building leaders, it doesn't get to that. Because we're clear on what we expect of each other.
Thank you. How would you assess the current culture and climate of our district? And what would you do to positively impact it?
The current culture is going to be a lot of discussion with folks, people sitting at these tables this evening, building leaders, teachers, kids. Part of my plan is to be very visible and get in all the buildings on a very regular basis, and having conversations and feeling the culture. And the culture at not just the buildings where kids are, but also the buildings where adults are, transportation, maintenance, ESB. Is the culture healthy there as well? So it is getting out, taking what I like to call a pulse check, and asking just real intentional questions about the culture. The positive things I would do is making sure that we're doing what we can to positively model what we expect. So being out I'm a pretty energetic person, so that helps me a bit. But shaping the culture with the adults of what we expect from our adults and what we expect them to model for children. Working with parents and families with a very high level of respect and making sure that we're communicating and getting their needs met. Listening when we need to listen, and modeling here in this room every other Thursday of what we want our community to feel our culture is, in a very positive light, and a united group and a united team moving the district forward that benefits kids. And doing that is lots of different ways. In my previous job, we were at one point we're at 56% of our immunizations in one building, and that is huge. And it took 2 years to get all of our buildings at 95% or higher. And one of the things I did is had we have Chartwells, make huge platters of cookies and balloons, and hand delivered them to every single building and administrative assistant who worked their tails off to get that where it needed to be. And so doing those small things, small notes, recognition, celebrating, we do not do that enough. We need to make sure that we're acknowledging good work and acknowledging good modeling and behaviors, and that just becomes natural. And giving people the courage to have difficult conversations with each other. It has to happen. So, doing the little things matters. Following up when you say you're going to follow up is the best thing you can do for a culture. And if you can't follow up in that moment, reaching out to that person and saying, I got a little behind, can we connect tomorrow? But again, it goes all back to communication. And that culture is going to be built on good communication and being responsive to people that are asking for responses. That feeds right into the culture. Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Thank you. So next, we are going to take a few minutes to provide you with an opportunity to ask any questions you might have of the board. And then with the time remaining after that, we have about 17 minutes total. You can give a closing statement or anything you would like to add.
Thank you. I was terrified I was watching that clock every 2 seconds. So thank you for this opportunity. wanted to ask the board, like, this is a big time of transition. You have some leaders that have been here for 12 years, and I'm just looking at what are your immediate needs in a superintendent during a time of transition, and in leadership for the whole district?
The way we've been handling this is we look around and
Yeah, that's
no one
normal.
answers, it's mine.
That's normal.
If you wonder why I'm looking at
Then it's
everybody.
yours.
Does anyone want to?
No, that's yours.
Okay. Oh, go ahead. I
No,
was
you
gonna
ra-
say, I just need somebody that's gonna communicate, even through the hard decisions.
Yeah.
You know, might not be comfortable, but does take on the task and raise to the challenge.
Do you have a mode of communication you prefer?
I just communicate.
Okay, anyway, text,
Yeah,
telephone?
Text, call
Okay.
me, anything, It's the crickets, the silence that I don't like.
Okay, I appreciate that.
I'd concur with that.
Okay,
One of my frustrations over the years is there's sometimes I can get a pretty quick answer, and there's sometimes I don't get any answer. And I'd rather just have somebody say no,
yeah,
or I don't like that idea, or don't ask me anymore because we're not doing that. You didn't use these words, but a characteristic that I would like in our next superintendent would be someone who was conflict proficient and didn't shy away from having a difficult conversation
yeah.
or making a difficult decision when it was in the best interest of the kids.
Appreciate that, thank you.
I think definitely we need someone who can unify our community. As I've said before, coming out of a pandemic, global pandemic, and everything that's happening in our society has caused a lot of divisiveness, and it's caused kids to be unsure, even though they might not state that. I'm guessing my suspicion is that they're feeling that and watching adults in the room and watching their community members and watching people that they want to model. And so having someone who can come in and build relationships quickly and communicate, and I certainly support what my fellow trustees said, someone who can lead us and help us have difficult conversations so that the community as a whole can feel like we're always keeping kids at the center of our decision-making, even if we don't like those decisions themselves.
Yep, thank
Can I
you.
add one more thing?
Please.
Okay. So I feel like we have a lot of really great momentum, and I don't want to lose that. I think we've got a really good trajectory in our district, and I kind of thought about that after the last conversation. And I think we have, I don't have a big fear of losing that because I think we have great staff. But I don't know if everybody gets that. That it's, the challenges at the cabinet level, I want that to be stabilized, obviously, but I feel like, the real work is being done, no offense
That's
to
okay.
our cabinet, but the boots on the ground
Yeah.
people are the ones that are really, continuing to do the work that has been established. And I don't think we have a big fear of that, but I want everybody to know that, to not be concerned about that, I guess. Does that make sense?
It does, I actually address it in my closing statement, so thank
okay.
you, yeah.
Good
No, it does
segue.
make sense.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask, what are you most excited about as a board? I really like to focus on the positive. What are you excited about as the Board of Education? What is coming down the pikes, or what are you lifting up right now?
I mean, I think that we have amazing students. We have high-achieving students. We have kids who find their way, even if maybe they don't fall into that category. We have exceptional staff here in our district who really, really care care about what they do every day, whether they are the custodian or the bus driver, food services, teachers, administrators. We have a diverse community that we are lucky to have, and we should reach and find opportunities in that community and how that can offer students what they need to fulfill the vision and mission of the district. So there is tons of positivity here. Although we focused a little bit on what we would like to see happen, I think that we all agree that Novice is an excellent school community.
It is.
I'm excited about what's going to be happening. You know, we're, as you look out the pile of dirt over here, the new 5th, 6th building, we're going to add on to the back of the high school, hopefully, so we can have some of those skilled trades in there to send kids out of here with certificates that they can go get a job to either help pay for college or in lieu of college.
Yeah.
I mean, so we have so many exciting opportunities for the next 5 years here. It's great, and the administration that come on, they're going to see that vision, and I'm sure they're going to run with it, and hopefully we get some even better ideas. So that's what I'm excited
It
about.
is exciting. That is exciting.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, did she steal yours?
No, not really, but okay. Sorry, Willie. That comes from Willie and Mary Ann.
Thank you.
Kathy?
I think I would add, over the last 3 nights, we have heard a lot about the after effects of the pandemic. And this past school year, we had a lot of second graders and first graders who had never been in their classroom.
Yeah.
And so we've got this like back to school year under our belts, and next year there will be, except for kindergartners, there's not going to generally be any kids who haven't already been through a school year in person. And to me, it just has a little bit of back to normalcy.
Yeah.
And I think that is, it's stabilizing for everybody, for kids, for teachers, and I don't know, I'm looking forward to kind of bouncing off of that.
Agree.
I guess I'd agree with that. I'll speak for myself. I'm looking forward to healing. I'd say a couple of years ago, our board was lockstep and everything was great. We're cruising along and we're the #1 school district in the state. And sadly today, there might be some resentment at this table. There might be some hurt feelings. There might be some leftover anger and sadness and regret, perhaps. So I'm looking forward to not blowing things up. We just sat here as a group and watched Principal Carter get recognized for what, being the #1 principal in the state of Michigan?
Hopefully the country.
And I can remember conversations in this room where we weren't sure we wanted her to be our principal.
Yep.
So there's something to be said for giving people an opportunity, for welcoming people, for continuing the great work that has taken place, and for forgiving and healing and moving forward and building trust and building unity. And I think to your point, Carol, it starts with honest communication and doing what you say when you say you're going to do it.
Right.
And we have an opportunity to do that moving forward as a district and as a board. So I'm looking forward to that.
Well
Thank you.
said. I think that's it. I had a couple others, but the discussion took care of that, so thank you. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you. So if you'd like to, we have some time remaining. We have 7 minutes.
Oh,
a
I
little
would
over.
never waste any of my extra
I
time.
know. You're like, let's get down to this. Stop talking.
I'm totally kidding. Yeah, I do have just a few closing words. Don't let this pile frighten you. I am really touched and beyond thrilled to be here today with the opportunity to serve as the next superintendent here in Novi. Leading students is without the core of who I am as an educator. It is my mission as a person. I live and breathe, and the two don't separate. I'm proud of Novi for the boundless experiences that you offer to students and the opportunities. And through my experiences outside of Novi, I know how special that is. I've had opportunities to compare. While I may have stepped away for a few years, I've never stopped being a wildcat. I've demonstrated my abilities to be a transformational leader. I've made an impact on education throughout my 32 years, and 23 of them here, as a teacher, several levels at the leadership roles, as a central office official, and even an educational consultant. My success within education speaks for itself. I've often been faced with daunting challenges related to budget cuts, underdeveloped systems. I delivered on objectives, whether it was student growth, ensuring absolute compliance at the federal, state level, and revamping archaic systems or negotiating multiple collective bargaining contracts at once. I get it done. The lessons I've learned as a leader, as a consensus builder, a team member, and change agent prepared me for this very role today. It's not by accident that I'm back, and hoping to be back for good. In addition to my experience of doing the work, I pride myself on the ability to unite people, even during the most challenging times. I do this through communication and going towards the conflict as it is an opportunity to listen and learn. As humans, we may not always agree, but we always can find mutual respect and a common ground. And for me, that's simple to find a common ground in education, because the common ground should always do what is best for students and for kids. As a leader and a person, I'm known for my integrity and accountability, especially when handling difficult situations with the highest level of confidentiality, compassion, and grace. It is always my intention to do what is best interest for the district, for the 922 employees, for the nearly 7,000 students, and for the families that come along with all of those students. This is hard work, and I'm prepared to navigate the district through a transition in leadership and beyond. I know the greatness that resides here, and I know what it takes to push forward in the 21st century. I'd be remiss as a leader and an advocate if I did not mention the overwhelming need to stabilize education, the education workforce, and reignite young scholars to choose education as a profession. Novi is not immune to the national teacher shortage, and I call it the national education shortage. I've seen scores of educators, young and experienced, walk away from one of the most important professions. As we all know, education opens doors to opportunities, and it impacts all of our futures. If there's any district that can build a learning community that honors, respects, nurtures, and grows educators, it is Novi. All the students deserve a Novi education, all of them. I went to a baseball game 2 weeks ago, and I sat in the baseball field here in Novi, and I just thought, my God, every kid deserves this. Every kid. We need great educators, and it's our duty to honor them so that they remain in the profession that is so critical for students. I'm going to leave you with one of my favorite quotes said by Brené Brown in her book, Dare to Lead. Quote, "Brave leadership demands people to be courageous, self-aware, and put more importance on getting things right than being right." I sit before you as a brave leader, excited to serve the Novi Community School District as the next superintendent. Thank you, and I've enjoyed seeing all of you and having the opportunity this evening.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you.
And I'll just read this whole statement because I
Yes.
did it for everybody.
Yes,
So
please.
We appreciate your interest in the superintendent position for Novi Community School District. The board is interviewing 6 candidates. You are our final candidate to be interviewed this week. We will let you know Thursday evening where you stand in our search process, and thank you for your participation in this first round interview.
Thank you for allowing me to participate. I appreciate it.
Did you have?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
It's okay.
Yep. So this is just a glance.
Thank you, Ms. Doyle.
Thank you so much. And